All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar, How Apparel Brands Can Win on Amazon in 2020. I'm Laura Lawless, Director of Revenue Marketing here at Salsify. Today, our Amazon experts, Alexandra Alves, Retail Success Manager at Salsify, and Andrew Weber, Director of Insights at Takeametrix, will share how COVID has impacted apparel brands and actionable steps and best practices for how to win on Amazon. For those of you who are not familiar with Takeametrix, their technology platform, along with their team of expert analysts, help thousands of brands profitably grow their sales on Amazon and Walmart.com. Before I kick it over to Andrew, I just have a couple additional housekeeping items. We've purposely left plenty of time for questions from the audience at the end of the session. So if you have questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation, feel free to add those in the Q&A portion of the Zoom. And if we can't get to your questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you directly just to answer those. We'll also be sending out a recording of the presentation, so you don't have to worry if you miss anything or if you have team members that couldn't join. You should get a link to the recording in your email in a day or so. All right, that's all from me. Andrew, take it away.
Great, thanks, Laura. So yeah, today, just to go over a quick agenda here. So the first thing, and this will be kind of on me, we'll be talking kind of about recent trends we've been seeing when we talk about the apparel market in light of COVID, both in the immediate impact and then kind of since that time. And really, what does that mean for your business? How should you adjust? Then Alex is going to take over, really talking about best practices. What wins in apparel based on what we know from anecdotal and even what the data tells us. And then we're both going to kind of go over really key takeaways you should leave today with, that you can take within your own business and really put into practice as we kind of finish out the year, looking towards Q4, et cetera. So what Takeametrix does is really think about how are you going to effectively drive people to your pages in the most efficient way on Amazon that's going to drive traffic, right, and hopefully drive sales, right? And Salsify, it's really about the content, right? Once you get people to the page, how are you going to make sure that you're putting yourself in the best position to actually convert those shoppers into purchases? So these are both two very important portions of your overall retail strategy on Amazon, but they're, again, they very much work in concert with each other. And right, the reason why is because this is about the path to purchase, right? That when you invest in ads, Amazon sees an uplift in any kind of sales velocity, even if it's driven by paid, as a positive indicator that your product is relevant and that we as an Amazon should be surfacing your product higher up in organic. And that's what you really want, right? You want to be #1 organic on a, for instance, like top category term in your vertical, because that means that consumers, when they actually search, you don't have to pay for that spot, right? You want to be in the place where you don't have to pay for it, but in order to get there, a lot of times you really have to put paid budget towards it. So, right, you need to pair all these together and then really use content as a way to drive people towards a purchase once they hit your page. So, this is all part of this, strategy about raising awareness for your product, and then that eventually makes it that you don't have to pay for that traffic. So some recent trends that we've kind of looked at here at Takeametrix around COVID. This is based on data both within our own database and then along with kind of general data that we've gotten from just Amazon at large as we've looked at the marketplace. So, Amazon is a huge market for apparel. This is something that was not necessarily their bread and butter when you look back 5-6 years ago, but they've definitely become a destination. Obviously, they've invested in their own household brands, but they've also put a lot of their own corporate energy into getting more apparel brands on the site. They feel this is a really strategic market for them. They want sellers to be on there. But at the same time, right, it's very competitive. It's always been a competitive market. It's especially competitive on Amazon. And what happened initially with COVID is, right, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, right? You had supply chain disruptions, especially because some of the early countries that were hit with the virus, right, were China and those in East Asia, where a lot of manufacturing happened. So that had downstream effects on supply chain. You then, right, starting in March and really through most of April, you had Amazon FBA, which was changing up kind of how they prioritize products, and clothing was one of the verticals that really got the short end of the stick there in terms of getting FBA priority. That was crippling to a ton of businesses. And then additionally, you saw a rapid shift in what consumers needed, right? They weren't going to the office anymore. They were staying at home. Their needs changed. Their needs changes dramatically in a short period of time. Their behavior changed on Amazon. But the point being is, right, that each of these was not a one-time deal and then we went right back to normal. Obviously, they've evolved, right? These changes have been there, but they haven't, right? The changes that we saw in March and April have become a little different than what we've seen in May, June, and July. But you still see elements of what was occurring kind of in this early period of the virus still impacting the apparel market even now, but it's changed a bit. And to just kind of illustrate this kind of early impact, here's a graph. This was put together by Marketplace Pulse, but I think it's very illustrative. This is across all of Amazon, but it shows that you saw the steady uptick in the percentage of sellers that were offering Prime shipping. And then really once you hit late February into March and April, that was the first time you really saw an actual significant downtick in the percentage of sellers actually offering that type of fulfillment option. And a lot of people thought, oh, well, if consumers are now not getting the service that they expect from Amazon, is that going to hurt Amazon down the line? And the answer is no. But consumers were, inundated with this, where they understood that, really they were looking at products where 3-4 months ago, they were expecting, 2, 3, 4 day shipping times, typically around the 2-day, right, with Prime, where sometimes those would balloon to a week, 2 weeks, even more. And that was very difficult, obviously, for consumers, and it kind of put them in a difficult spot, but things have changed, right? So what's been very interesting is that initially we looked at, across our customer base, what was happening in March versus, let's say, the average revenue generated in January, February, and what those differences were. And what was very interesting here is there was this very big bifurcation. This wasn't a typical bell curve where you saw the impacts more in the lower range, 10 to 20%, either positive or negative. Right, you see here the plurality of revenue changes on a month-over-month basis were either greater than 100% or where the revenue dipped by more than 51%. So huge differences. And this is across all of Amazon, but it really shows how certain industries, certain brands, depending on their supply chain, had just such a variable impact. There was huge differences in terms of how brands fared during the initial period. And clothing was one that was negatively impacted on a vertical by vertical basis, right? You see very big differences, right? Grocery, obviously, big month for grocery in March, just by people stocking up, et cetera. Meanwhile, clothing saw these negative impacts. You saw a lot of people pulling back on ad spend, obviously, because you had supply chain constraints. And that also you saw just lower demand on certain categories, right? You think, work gear, jewelry, right? Not as big as a market, right? When you're staying home all the time. But this doesn't mean, right, to my point earlier, this wasn't all bad, right? Depending on your exact product line, depending on your supply chain, there were opportunities. And what we saw were certain traffic in terms of click volume to certain keywords rose dramatically. So in the case of clothing, you saw men's t-shirts. Click volume to the term men's t-shirt went up by close to 2,000% over the January, February averages, right? You're staying at home. You don't need fancy clothes anymore. You want a plain t-shirt, right? These were needs that consumers were having, and it was being reflected in their search behavior. Same thing with black leggings. Women, you're not going into the office anymore, having comfortable black leggings probably made a lot of sense. And so you saw click volume to those terms really skyrocket. So just illustrating that there were bright spots outside of obviously a lot of, problem areas for clothing brands during this time. So what's changed since that initial period? I think the biggest thing is improved shipping times, right? Amazon FBA slowly crept back to normal. It's obviously not there yet. There's still challenges. I know a lot of manufacturers still seeing challenges there. But shipping times are definitely improving. You're seeing more and more products hit that 2-day window, hit closer to the 2 to 4-day window, depending on the product. That means it's easier for consumers to pick something and get something pretty immediately, which is what they typically had come to expect from Amazon. Along with this, right, you see supply chain issues that are slowly getting better, right? China's getting back up and running a little bit more. You see in other areas that have slowly gotten a little bit better from the virus. That's helped brands kind of get back up to their normal supply chain. And then finally, kind of as a makeup for Amazon giving those, apparel vendors the kind of short end of the stick when it came to FBA during March and April. Amazon a few weeks ago, right, did their big style sale, which was focused explicitly on apparel products. And it was kind of like a mini Prime Day, since Prime Day is getting pushed back. So these were all very nice things, at least in the interim. But right, as I'm sure you guys all know, right, we're not out of the woods yet. There's a lot of still volatility in the market. Things are still changing rapidly. So it's really, important that you understand kind of what's happening, what's coming, and how you should think about adjusting. So let's talk about that big style sale and what happened. So we looked at across our entire customer base of several thousand sellers. We looked at click volume and associated activity on individual keywords, specifically in this case, individual keywords that are within the clothing, shoes, and jewelry category. This includes obviously the subcategories of men's fashion, women's fashion, etc. And what you see here kind of on, you're right, this is plotted on a 7-day rolling average. You see really, right, things take a big dip where you're hitting really the bottom end of this, the nadir here in, end of March into April, and then things slowly climb back, right? Shipping times slowly get better. And you see kind of click volume rise a little bit, sales volume rise a little bit. But what's very interesting is that you actually saw sales, and these are specifically ad-derived sales, mind you, but it's kind of a good proxy, again, for overall activity in the market, that those sales peaked the week prior to the sales event. That sales event started on June 22nd, ended on June 29th, yet sales peaked around June 14th. Now, you saw a lot of media attention around this big style sale, because a lot of this was probably the biggest thing, right? There wasn't a lot going on in e-commerce from a, that was maybe positive. So you saw a lot of outlets pick this up. And you could also see that consumers, right, as you see from that ongoing trend, right, we're seeing better shipping times, and they were coming back to the site and ordering. And you saw CPCs kind of stay largely level, which means that that level of activity was being met by also advertisers coming back, spending a little more. That was kind of matching that rise in activity. So Amazon has an opportunity to move the market even outside of a sales event. What's kind of interesting, though, is that this didn't carry over to other categories. It really was localized only within the clothing category. So here for this graph, we looked at click volume, but we took out all those keywords we looked at in the previous graph. So it was only basically non-clothing, shoes, and jewelry, non-fashion keywords. And basically see those clicks peaked closer to the end of April in total, but right, you see it kind of just level off towards that June timeframe. So right, consumers weren't turned off, let's say long-term, right, due to those shipping delays we saw in March and April, right? That's what we saw from the previous graph. And as I talked about earlier, even with kind of minimal to no advertising, this wasn't like a Prime Day push where Amazon was putting a lot of TV ads out there and other things, right? It was kind of under the radar. The media picked it up, but otherwise it was fairly, low key. That still moved the needle, right? It still definitely helped juice demand, at least to some degree. But if Amazon decides to do more of these focused sales events where they pick a specific vertical and we're going to do, landing page and promotions around that, don't expect that to drive activity across the site. And that's a little different than what we saw with Prime Day, where it's a little more varied and everything gets a bit of a boost. And to that end, kind of we did this study last year looking at 2019's Prime Day. And what we saw, 94% of products that we looked at, and this is across our entire customer base, saw a revenue increase. And that what was very interesting is that there's definitely a correlation for products that had a discount. They had, right, as you see here in that left-hand corner, they had the bigger revenue gains on average. But even products that didn't have any kind of discount still saw a 496% increase in revenue. So discounts are not a absolute necessity, even during these high traffic events, right? If they're doing these broad high traffic events, you can see an increase in sales even without discounts. However, as we talked about earlier, if Amazon decides to do in the future, and we don't know what's going to happen, they decide to do more of these focused sales events around a specific vertical, just be aware that that won't be a rising tide lifts all ships scenario. Because of the way they architect it with a specific landing page, it seems to really be localized on that single vertical. So just be prepared for that. And with that, I think it's important now to think about, okay, now if you're looking to get people to your pages, what's going to get them to convert? So I want to pass it over to Alex, who can really talk through that aspect of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. So like Andrew mentioned, next we want to highlight some actions around content that all of you can take now to improve your content on Amazon and especially to prepare for Q4. So the truth is that many apparel brands are struggling to get their content up to the standards that Amazon recommends to drive engagement and conversion. In fact, the bottom 10% of apparel products score a 34%, so an F when it comes to their content. But the top 10% of apparel products on Amazon only score a 73, which is better, but still not great. But, you know, we empathize with the reasons this is the case. I actually used to be an apparel buyer, so I'm actually very familiar with the challenges you all face. You know, things like the amount of SKUs you have to manage, the need to just move fast to launch new collections, and the constant competition from fast fashion brands that require you to be really agile and flexible to keep up. But the good news is that if you put in the effort and follow some of these content best practices, you can really shine in this category as compared to your peers who, again, are still scoring a 73% at best. So to dive into where you can focus to drive results, the first best practice that we'll discuss is around title length and feature bullets. So these are the first things that your customers see just before and right after they click into your PDPs. Having strong titles is going to help with SEO optimization and support a strong sales and search rank, especially since we know that customers are often searching for unbranded keywords, meaning they'll just type, you know, black dress or pink jacket into the search bar instead of searching by a specific brand name. So if no one can find your products, then the rest of the best practices and your ad strategy don't really make a difference, since that shopper will never reach your PDP. So adding even 1 or 2 additional keywords to your titles can really help increase your page views, and compelling, concise bullet points help draw the user in and lead them to spend more time on the page before making a purchase. The second best practice is all about images. So it's obviously no secret that having strong product images will drive conversion, but we also want you to consider the number of images that you include on your pages. So a Salsify consumer report found in 2017 that customers expected to see 3 images per product on the PDP. And then just 2 years later in 2019, which is when the data you see here was collected, customers had doubled that expectation and said that they wanted to see 6 images per product on the PDP. And the top 10% of brands across pretty much every category are still falling short of that expectation. And that includes fashion brands, which are represented in the orange bar that you see here, the last one. Switch to the next slide, Andrew. And so in that same study, we also asked consumers, why have you ever abandoned a product page on a retailer site? And the top reason that 69% of consumers told us they abandoned those pages is because there isn't enough information or detail being provided. So that's the general theme we've been seeing from consumers over time, and we know that their expectations will continue to be increasingly demanding, especially in the age of COVID, right? When shoppers are relying on more information online so that they can make smart purchasing decisions. So every time we miss these expectations, we miss an opportunity for a sale. The third best practice, which I think is one of the most important ones, is A+ content. So A+ content, which I'm sure you are all familiar with and is also sometimes called enhanced content, rich media, or below the fold media, is the way for you to tell your brand story on Amazon. So for CPG brands, we like to say that enhanced content is the digital version of their packaging. When it comes to apparel, think about when consumers shop in store and they're able to touch and feel clothing or accessories. When they aren't able to do that, like they aren't these days, or when they're just deciding to shop online, enhanced content is the way to create that emotional response that your shopper may have when she sees a piece of clothing merchandise on a mannequin or as the star product on a clothing rack. So good A+ content really allows you to communicate key product information in an engaging way, but also to inspire your shoppers to want or even need that product in their lives. And in fact, 40% of the PDPs in apparel that fall in the top 10% on Amazon have A+ content versus only 1% of the PDPs that fall in the bottom 10%. And we have seen that including A+ content on product pages drives results. So again, from a Salsify consumer survey, we found that brands who use our enhanced content product to apply rich media to their products saw a 10% average lift in conversion on the digital shelf, which includes Amazon. And they were also able to apply that rich media to more of their catalog so that they doubled the coverage across their assortment, which ensures a consistent brand story across all of their PDPs. So A+ content is definitely an investment. We don't want to diminish that fact, but it is an important one that will drive your performance on Amazon and drive loyalty with your shoppers.
And just to hop in here, I think it's important to know that, what we see with clothing is, and really apparel in general is, unlike some verticals where someone's, used to, hey, it's more of a commodity shopping or something very quick. They know what they want, right? Fashion and apparel, more of a personal purchase. So they're going to be more likely to scroll down the page. We see that in search behavior. People are more willing to scroll down the page a little bit more. It's going to be the same with your PDP. So definitely A+ is, I think that big difference between 40% versus 1%, like that's the number to pay attention to, is just that difference. You put yourself in a much better position when you got A+ content, just generally.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fourth best practice here is around ratings and reviews. So today, when more and more people are shopping online, ratings and reviews are more important than ever. So the top 10% of product pages on Amazon in the apparel and jewelry categories included an average of 698 reviews and an average star rating of 4.1. So we wanted to highlight the importance of the number of reviews even more than your overall star rating. When you deliver consistently excellent service, you encourage your customers to leave those reviews, which helps to build trust. And we know that shoppers trust other shoppers. So having strong reviews creates that trust, which drives purchases, which creates shopper loyalty, and which continues to drive repeat purchases. So really important to focus on delivering that excellent service and driving loyalty, and really encouraging your shoppers to leave those reviews on your PDPs. And finally, the fifth and last best practice is about investing in product experiences. And what we mean by that is really finding that sweet spot between your transactional commerce content and the content that tells your brand story. That sweet spot here in the middle is the difference between a customer just transacting on your PDP versus the customer having an experience on your PDP, which keeps them coming back for more. And what we see on the digital shelf is that brands and brand stories have been missing from the experience on Amazon. So while the examples here aren't all of apparel brands, we see that brands across the spectrum tend to invest heavily in their own D2C sites, but that investment doesn't translate to the Amazon PDP. And the question is, why shouldn't it, right? So brands like Olay and Espresso, who sell first party on Amazon, have control over their pages and could use some of the best practices we're talking about to really improve their pages, starting now. And Nike, as you know, if you followed recent news, has really stepped away from investing in their Amazon business. So as a result, their PDPs and their brand experience is lacking, in spite of the fact that Nike is probably the most well-known brand for creating compelling lifestyle imagery to drive sales. So we wanted to highlight 5 key action items that you can take to really focus on how to create a product experience. So the first one is around organizing your content. So now is a good time in preparation for Q4 to really do a content audit, align your marketing and e-commerce teams or Amazon business managers, anyone who's really invested in your Amazon business, and ensure that the foundation of your content is ready for success. And then the second point, we just wanted to reiterate the importance of A+ content to differentiate your products and tell your story and really create an experience that inspires your shopper and recreates that in-store experience that we're also familiar with. And then the third key action item here is to be the best partner to your retailers. And, we know that Amazon is big and complicated, but there are so many resources like this webinar out there and also at Amazon. So take the time to get familiar with the Amazon process in and out and focus on getting the content right so that your product experience isn't compromised. And next, we suggest focusing on automation, increasing your agility. When you spend less time filling out spreadsheets and doing manual work, you can spend more time thinking about how to drive home your brand story and create that strong customer loyalty. And finally, leveraging analytics. So be creative. Take a test and learn approach to learn what works and what doesn't, what resonates with your customers and what doesn't. And keeping a close eye on that performance really allows you to gain insights so that you can apply all of the best practices we talked about today in the most optimal way to drive your results. And with that, I will pass it back to Andrew to review in more detail how you can apply these metrics and best practices to your businesses.
Great, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so let's go into really putting this into practice. What should you be doing next? And we're looking at this in the context of really growing your business in Q4. This is about capturing market share and brand growth. You don't want to stagnate as much as you can, right? And a lot of this comes down to just best practices throughout the entire year, but something that becomes even more important during high traffic periods like Q4. So the first one is concentrate both your attention from your PDPs and your sponsored products and sponsored brands campaigns to key unbranded search terms across your product catalog. So what you see here, this is part of the infographic that Salsify and Takeametrix put together the other month. But looking across the top 1,000 just category terms, just any term that brings up products that were within the clothing, shoes, and jewelry category. 74, these are the top, right, the biggest terms, the terms that are going to drive the most traffic. 74% of those were unbranded or generic terms, right? Things without things like gold watch or black shoes versus only 26%, which were branded, right? That's like Nike shoes or Rolex watch, right? So you have a much bigger opportunity to rank on these category terms that are obviously that are high traffic. It's also easier to rank on those terms, as we'll talk about a little bit later. So what you should be asking yourself is, hey, on those unbranded terms that are key for each and every product in your catalog, where are you ranking? Are you on page 1, which is pretty much a necessity? If you're not on page 1, you might as well not exist, right? People, even in apparel, people are a little more likely to scroll down the page. You still see close to, anywhere between 40 to 50, sometimes even more % of conversions actually happening within the top 3 or 4 results. And this is something from ARA. And again, so you need to know how consumers convert on those terms. So what are those terms? Where are you ranking, right? If you're in the top 3 on a term organically, it's a great place to be. It means that you might not need to spend to actually get up in those top of search. Top 10 may even be okay depending on the search. But if you're really lower than that, you need to really think about, okay, what's the incremental value here? How should I be driving sales right for those top terms? And right for each of those terms, look at ARA, the search term reports that Amazon provides, and you can understand for those terms, they give you, this is really helpful, for each and every term, you can look at this on a weekly or monthly basis, what the top 3 organic placements capture as a percentage of total organic conversions. Now, right, this doesn't include paid, but you can use it as a proxy, right? If you know that 60% of organic conversions are happening in the top 3 organic results, it stands to reason a similar amount are happening also within the top 3 paid results. So, use that as a guidepost as you kind of think about where you want to place your bets. And what you want to do is start now. Start exploring what keywords work, and specifically focus not on, again, if you're thinking about advertising cost of sale or ACoS, really focus on conversion rates. Conversion rates are going to tell you whether a term is worth your money or not. ACoS is a lagging indicator, right? These, it's an efficiency metric, and the way Amazon works is, right, you have conversion windows that are fairly long, and you're going to end up placing bets based on information that's a little old versus being able to kind of pivot quickly. And that's going to be, building those muscles now internally, organizationally, is going to be really helpful as we get to that high traffic season. So you can understand what keywords are actually driving good results and where you want to, if conversion rates are getting higher, that actually means you want to probably raise your bid, because that means it's a valuable keyword and you want to capture those profitable results. This helps, obviously, if you have a, partner, Takeametrix, one of them. There's others out there that can kind of help you understand where there's enough data validity to place those bets. But this is a good strategy for just giving you the agility to make these decisions. And to the last point, it's a lot harder to rank on an unbranded term versus a branded term. And this is because of the way Amazon works. Amazon, if you're a consumer and you're on their site and you search for a branded term, I want Adidas shoes, they will do everything possible to put Adidas shoes in front of you, because I know you search for a brand and you're obviously interested in that brand. So in that sense, your products that are branded, if you're a well-known brand, they're going to rank. Because they're going to rank on your own branded terms, because Amazon is going to predispose the results to show those. However, on an unbranded search, which again are much more frequent, and when you talk about the top searches within the clothing category, it's a lot harder to rank, which means your products, if you don't have a few really high selling products, those products aren't probably ranking. And also think about it, unless you're a very well-known brand, a lot of people are not searching for your brand specifically. So these unbranded terms are the way to start getting that sales velocity, that sales history that's actually going to help you rank organically over time. So really concentrate on those. It's harder to rank organically on unbranded, but it's worth it. Those are the things where you're going to have consumers coming in not knowing what brand they want. You have an opportunity to capture them, essentially at this part of the purchase funnel where they don't know what brand they want.
And just really quickly to jump in there, I want to tie that point back to the best practice around titles and bullet points. So just making sure that your keywords are optimized and that they're interesting and compelling and driving shoppers to your pages.
Yeah, exactly, right. That's where Amazon is getting that information from. They're not getting it out of thin air. They're looking at your bullets, they're looking at your titles and keeping them fresh, and what people are actually searching for, Alex, that's the bread and butter, right? To really make sure you're hitting those marks. Additionally, I think it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about buy box. Buy box, especially within the clothing, shoes, and jewelry, can get incredibly competitive, and you need to have a plan for troubleshooting. This is a great little cheat sheet that Big Commerce put together, which is really kind of shows what could be issues on why you're not winning the buy box, and how these kind of tier up when it comes to the actual impact. So this is again, we're going to be sending along the recording and the presentation so you can kind of take a look at this, but this is a good thing to have in mind because buy box is obviously super, super important. If you're losing out as conversions are spiking, you're not getting those sales. I mean, something like 80 to 90% of conversions happen on what's winning the buy box. People don't, especially on mobile, they're not scrolling down and looking at those other sellers. If you're not winning the buy box, you're not getting those sales. And additionally, your advertising is not showing, because if you're not winning the buy box, Amazon will not show your ad. And this, again, especially if you're not really keeping track of this and keeping good tabs on it, can be crippling during high traffic periods. If you're losing out on the buy box for a day, during, peak Q4, that's tremendous, right? That's a huge loss of sales. And you really need to just really have your finger on the pulse here and understand what are the levers you can pull to kind of fix issues as they come up. Number 3 here is you need to, and I talked about this a little earlier, but you need to have flexibility. You need to be able to strike while the iron's hot as those conversions are coming in. And this is especially important this upcoming holiday season. You're going to have a lot more people shopping online than you did before. And to such a degree where normally, okay, that was the trend that was all going, right? Everyone talked about this every year. Oh, there are more people shopping online, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to be the year where this explodes because a lot of consumers, reasonably are nervous about going to a store, especially a crowded store during the holiday season. So you're going to have this, we're already seeing this right in the early months where like year over year, e-commerce shopping was up a tremendous degree. This is going to be even more evident this upcoming holiday season. And in clothing, right, make sure, to Alex's point around product content, make sure your product content's in a great place here. Because if consumers are shopping for fashion, et cetera, that's something where a lot of people did like to touch and feel the clothes, et cetera. Make sure you've got that type of information, fit information within the images, material information within the bullets, that type of thing. That's going to be super important that you get that product content in a great place before this holiday season so people can really, get as close to touching the feel and feeling the products as possible without being able to do so. And getting back to the advertising side, when the iron's hot, when you're seeing conversion rates rise, you should be increasing your bid. Because if conversion rates are rising, it means that's a keyword that is, again, driving sales. You don't want to be pulling back as that's happening. And this also gets into the idea of budgeting. I think it's a lot of brands will have, okay, well, I've got X budget, and when that runs out, I'm out. Put the organizational effort in now, and I know that this is maybe easier said than done, but it's worth the effort because it's very justifiable to have uncapped budgets when there's profitable sales, right? If you know the next sale, if I can get it at, let's say, $1 a click, will be profitable for my business, you should be able to bid on that for as long as it takes until that sale is no longer profitable, even if you have hit whatever this budget cap is. Because if you pull back, your competitors are going to jump right in and take those profitable sales. And that's essentially, you're a victim of your own success. You've hit a keyword that's getting a ton of traffic, getting sales, getting clicks, but then you have to pull back because you've run out of budget. So really consider, how are you going to uncap your budget? And so let's get into kind of some final key takeaways, kind of, again, thinking about these recent high traffic periods. What should you be thinking about next? So going forward, I think first thing is, we hope there's a Prime Day in October. We don't know. There seems to be a lot of signs that there will be, but things can change. Things have changed a lot this year. It can change again. And remember, as I talked about earlier, even when, hopefully not if, but when Prime Day comes, price drops are not a make or break. They can be helpful, right? They obviously do drive slightly more revenue, but if you don't do a price drop, it doesn't mean you're not going to see any kind of benefit to Prime Day. You should still see this is a rising tide lifts all ships scenario with Prime Day, where people come to the site, they may look for deals, but then they'll buy a bunch of other stuff. That is probably going to be true this year as well. So just keep that in mind. Additionally, there are going to be more fulfillment challenges. It's almost a definite. You saw the shipping cutoff date last year to get stuff to warehouses prior to Christmas was December 3rd. Expect that to dip into November this year. Amazon's going to be dealing with challenges around, staffing warehouses appropriately and keeping people safe. Expect there to be more fulfillment challenges. And that may mean, look into FBM if possible. If you have the ability to get that kind of backstop, it may be worthwhile looking into it, because you may get into a situation where FBA, for some reason, is giving you challenges from a fulfillment side. Having that backstop may be very useful. Just, again, expect there to be problems, because there already have been. There's going to be another high traffic period. Just, be on the lookout there. And kind of outside of Amazon, think about Walmart.com if you haven't already. This is another channel. They've beefed up their e-commerce operations pretty significantly over the past several years. Their ad ecosystem's gotten a lot better. We're one of the few partners that can actually do that. But they essentially can act as a safety mechanism, so they're not totally cut off. If you're solely on FBA, especially, and you run into issues, having at least one channel that's up and running that's a big, large channel can at least blunt some of that impact. So really think about it. You can start that process now, getting your products up online there if you don't have them up on Walmart.com already, and also get your product pages in a good place as well. And then I think, Alex can talk more about the product experience.
Yeah, so sort of just reiterating what we've said earlier, this is a perfect time to just get your content together, do an audit, sort of give yourself a score. Where do you think you rank and where do you think you could rank? What teams do you need to bring into the loop and have a conversation with to get your content in a better place before it's going live on Amazon? And just continue thinking about a product experience. So obviously we want to transact, especially in Q4. That's paramount. But how do you capture the shoppers that are coming in Q4 so that they come back again the next quarter or the next month? How do you drive home an experience that's going to stick with them and really create that brand loyalty? So just something to continue thinking about, and hopefully the 5 key best practices we went through today help you get started in having those conversations. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Laura to answer any questions that came in during the webinar.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate you taking the time to go through that. We only have a couple minutes for questions, so feel free to submit yours through the Q&A feature of the Zoom panel. We do have a couple questions that came through as we were going along throughout the presentation, so I'm just going to cover those first. The first one is for Alex. So I think this question is probably coming from a smaller brand manufacturer. So they have a question specific to content. Do we need, and do you suggest that brands have a dedicated team to work on content specifically?
Yeah, so totally understand that a lot of teams are under-resourced in general, especially right now. But if possible, we definitely do recommend having a dedicated team. Creating and maintaining great content is a team sport. You want to try to break down the silos between, like I said earlier, your marketing or e-commerce or Amazon specific teams, and just make sure everyone's aligned on what the goals are so that you can work together toward them. And having dedicated resources to Amazon or to content will definitely help you streamline and put a reliable and repeatable process in place. So again, thinking for Q4 and then also beyond Q4, how do you continue to repeat a successful process that will continue to drive sales?
Great. Andrew, this next question is for you. And I think this is an interesting tactic or concept that someone has here. Is it a good idea to launch a product on Amazon during Prime Day?
So, of course, the answer is it depends. And I think it can be difficult, but you need to really have an airtight plan in place to how are you going to drive traffic? Because it can be a good time to launch a product, specifically because there are so many people on the site. So it allows you to, if you kind of put your marketing budget towards it and do so strategically, you can get that type of sales volume that will actually carry you then through, now the holiday season. So what you really need to do is put in place, okay, what are going to be with this product? Obviously getting, as Alex said, right? Okay, get your product content in a good place. Understand what's going to be on that page. Is it going to be hitting all the marks when it comes to best practices? That's like part of retail readiness. But then when you think about, okay, how am I going to get sales volume? How am I going to drive eyeballs to this product and get clicks? This is about category terms. Category terms are where you're going to, as I talked about earlier, that's where you're going to get the most volume. And you're going to get people that are not, that are higher up on the funnel. They don't know what brand they want yet. It can be tempting to conquest on category or on competitor terms where, oh, I know this is my big competitor. I'm going to try to hit their top of search and I'm going to, and that way I'll capture their sales, which can feel great. The issue with a product launch is you're doing it with a product that's probably got not too many reviews, which is an issue. And additionally, you're hitting people that already know what brand they probably want. So it's going to be a lot more expensive to do that. And you may just not see the results versus a category term where you could have a newer product that's exciting. You can at least drive people to it. You can get, you can hit that top of search and get those clicks and conversions. But again, the reason why it can be kind of tough to launch a product on Prime Day is because you won't have that review velocity early on. You're going to be launching a product essentially with little to no reviews. It means that you don't have that trust factor that consumers are coming in with and being like, oh, I'll click on a product because I see a couple hundred people have reviewed it. So just be aware that you're going to need to really have your ducks in a row. If you can get reviews prior to that, maybe you do kind of a soft launch, you at least get a number of reviews so that you can, more confidently kind of do a full-fledged marketing launch during Prime Day, that could be a good tactic. Because coming in with 0 or 1 or 2 reviews, you may not get the most bang for your buck. So just be prepared for that. Try to take a tactic that's going to hit on some of those content metrics that Alex talked about, and additionally get you on those terms that are going to drive volume. And again, use ARA or again, keyword research tools. Takeametrix has them in terms of understanding what terms are actually driving volume in advance, and you can kind of port those over based on what product you're launching. So really, you got to take a very careful planning approach here, because it can kind of blow up in your face if you're not too careful.
Cool. Super interesting. We have time for one more question. We are over. So Alex, I'm going to wrap with you because I think this is an interesting question that can kind of put a nice bow on it. What's the value of investing in updating all of our content pages? Do you think that this brand manufacturer would be better off just focusing on their top selling items on our top selling channels and or retailers? Do you have any insight or feedback on that question, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think the goal is to get, and ISL5 believes in this, is to really just get content to as many PDPs as you can, right? It helps to tell your brand story, but to make sure that your brand story is consistent. So a shopper doesn't go to one page, for a t-shirt and have a certain experience, then go look at the, matching joggers and have a completely different experience. So it can definitely be smart to update your highest priority products first, but getting to your long tail also offers the SEO benefits that we talked about earlier, in helping improve your ranking for organic search terms. And just to reiterate the stat that we mentioned earlier, Salsify found that the top 10% of apparel products on Amazon had significantly more A+ content present on their product pages. That was 40% of their product pages that had enhanced content, versus the bottom 10% of apparel products, less than 1% of their PDPs had enhanced content. So it does make a difference, but it can definitely be smart to focus on your highest priority products. But I would suggest having a strategy to get to the long tail products as well.
Yeah, and just to build on that quickly, before we wrap up, I think it's like, as you're thinking about what products to advertise, I mean, obviously, okay, your top selling products are obviously great to focus on. If you are thinking about, you need to defend your branded terms, your own branded terms, don't use your top selling products to advertise, right? Because those are products that people are going to click on anyway. So when you think about the products that you'll want to promote, even on your own branded terms, think about either newer products you want to promote, or potentially, as Alex talking about, maybe the long tail that you feel like these are good products to potentially put in front of folks that already know my brand. Definitely don't advertise your top selling products that are already going to be top of search organically, or essentially you're paying for sales you might have gotten organically anyway.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Alex. And thanks everyone for joining today. Much appreciated. As a reminder, we'll be sharing the recording following the presentation, so keep an eye out for that. And if you asked a question that we couldn't get to, we'll be certain to get back to you as soon as possible. We'll also be sharing the infographic that Andrew mentioned in his part of the presentation in the follow-up, email follow-up. So keep an eye out for that. All right, thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.